Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics. Welcome Y&R Spoilers. Young and the Restless Spoilers revealed that Lily knew something was different the moment the test flashed those two thin lines like two nerve-wracking strings in her chest. And what terrified her wasn't the pregnancy itself, but the opaque void of the unanswered question of who the father was. In a city where every secret has a price and every stumble is amplified, the uncertainty of parentage is like a neon sign above her head, inviting the judgments and calculations she's been trying to escape after the recent tragedies. Lily didn't want to touch Damien's warm pain, nor did she want to open another wound with Cain, but her body made its own judgment and forced her to face the moment when all avoidance became futile. She scheduled a test early, surrendering everything to science as a way to gather the fragments of her life that were falling apart. Hoping that the numbers would silence the whispers and return her to the comfort of certainty, the results came back in a sealed envelope, sending her down a more sinister curve, indeterminate, not negative, not positive, not anything that could be boxed and labeled. The lab noted that the comparison sample bearing Damien's name did not match the forensic file it had submitted. The genetic marker seemed bent somewhere along the chain, preventing the algorithm from producing a reliable diagnosis. The cold announcement shocked Lily in a different way. She realized that Damien's death had left behind not just grief, but also a shadowy trajectory around paperwork, specimens, and the power of those who wanted to use his name to sway the tables. As Lily wondered how she could prepare for motherhood when even the scientific data was being distorted, Amanda quietly set her coffee on the table, sat down across from her, and said what a lawyer with a nose for conspiracy would have to say. Damien's DNA profile had likely been switched months ago. The words rang out like a curing on a darkened floor. A small sound, but enough to set every instinctive guard ablaze. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Amanda began to reconstruct the chain of custody, the path of the sample, the opening of the seal, which signatures appeared, which disappeared, and the deeper she dug, the faintest traces of a hand trying to replace answers with ambiguity. Lily listened, her heart both lighter and heavier. Lighter because of the chance to clear herself of the fear that had slept with her all those long nights. Heavy because any truth pulled from the darkness would inevitably lead to confrontation. And that confrontation, whether he wanted it or not, was called Cain. Cain reacted like a man trying to hold on to something that had not yet collapsed. He suggested abandoning the plan to reunite, withdrawing his promise, withdrawing even the glances he had exchanged, citing the reason that he could not trust someone who was untrustworthy. For Cain, it was the most convenient way to lock the door before the storm hit. For Lily, it was a clear sign that he smelled danger around the pregnancy mystery and wanted to cut his losses before his emotional market fell into free fall. In Cain's mind was a cruel but pragmatic calculation. If the child was Damien's, the allies who were on the same side would leave en masse, not wanting to get involved in a tragedy with criminal and moral implications. If the child was his, Lily would have the leverage to force him to sign a confession agreement, isolating him before the law and in the eyes of his children. Either outcome would leave him out of control, and out of control was something he couldn't bear. So Cain quickly erected a verbal barrier. His plan, he said, concerned only the Chancellor. Everything else was a misunderstanding, Lily's private affair, ripples of inflated emotion. But Lily heard hollow silences in that barrier holster through which she could see the shadows of others meddling in his decisions. She knew how Cain chose his words when he wanted to put a coat of clear coat over the rubble. She could smell the dampness of the newly erected wall. And she knew that silence was no longer an option. Lily decided to dig on cautiously but fiercely to protect not only herself but also her two children from being drawn into an adult game that forced them to take sides. The thought took her to a point that even she found terrifying. If Cain continued to tamper with the truth, she would show Maddie and Charlie the unvarnished version of their father. Not to torture them, but to teach them to distinguish truth from fiction. Lily understood the consequences, the cost of letting her children see the cracked sides of their former pillar. But she also understood that prolonged blindness could damage their moral compass. She would rather be the one to end the blindness, to endure the momentary anger than let them grow up in a maze of smooth promises. Subscribe our channel for more latest updates. As the thought took shape, she felt a layer of ice break beneath her feet. A step of no return, but at least a step with purpose. Cain was genuinely surprised by the intensity of the decision. He had relied on Lily's love as a safety net, believing that she would always choose to protect the father figure in her child's eyes. that she would compromise to avoid breaking the fragile bond between the four of them. Realizing that Lily was willing to let Maddie and Charlie see into his shadow was like hearing a verdict without a trial. He began to respond to old habits. Citing work, citing pressure, citing a restructuring project at Chancellor as a shield. That kept him from detailing every detail day and night. But that shield over and over again only made Lily more aware of another influence at work. Colin had been the living definition of a bridge to trouble. Quick promises, short-term gains, long-term consequences. Lily no longer wanted to analyze how much of Cain's current persona came from Colin's shadow. She only had to look at the way Cain handled the crisis to know that the Colin school was still as clear as a faint but never erased stamp. She was more concerned with how the gap between Cain and Colin wouldn't become a straight line that would drag them both down. And as she looked back at the pieces, the hasty retreat, the just Chancellor story, the silence when the test was inconclusive, she saw Colin's pattern repeat itself in a frightening way. Creating fog, moving in fog, profiting in fog. Meanwhile, Amanda did her part as a believer in process. She collected copies of the unsealing records, compared signatures, checked hallway cameras, recorded the times in and out of the sample room, sent out official letters asking the forensics department to explain the discrepancies between the records and the comparison samples. From a scribbled note in the margin to an anonymous email containing the ID of the technician in charge of the night shift on the fateful day. Everything lined up, creating a faint but constant line pointing to the possibility that someone had replaced Dumas' sample with a control sample to frustrate any future comparisons. Amanda was in no rush to announce anything. She understood the value of timing and that revealing the truth too soon would give the real manipulators time to burn their traces. She advised Lily to choose an independent lab in another city with a double sealing system, parallel testing of 2 kits, and cold storage in a separate vault to prevent any interference. Lily agreed and built a legal safety net around the immediate future, a preparing memorandum with basic medical, financial, and communications provisions, a family therapy schedule if Cain wanted to engage in the journey of parenthood in a mature way, and a final cold but necessary provision that if the results confirmed Cain was the father, he would have to sign a truthful statement of all recent actions related to the Chancellor project and any parallel arrangements that might affect the safety of mother and child. These terms were not meant to be humiliating. They were the protection Lily needed as she navigated a stormy season she couldn't predict. Cain looked at the documents with the eyes of someone who had successfully bargained in a boardroom, but this time, the stakes weren't shares or profit margins, but trust. He briefly tried to stall by asking for an independent review, for a lawyer, for more time. But each minute was another step up the ladder that Lily understood he feared not for the truth, but for losing control of the story. She no longer wanted to argue. She sent samples to the new lab, made an appointment for the following week, and cleared her house of anything that could be used as a weapon in an argument. She called Maddie and Charlie, telling them as gently as she could that there would be a lot they wouldn't like, but that their discomfort was the foundation on which they stood. At Chancellor, rumors drifted through the halls like smoke through a door. Cain was backing out of certain moves. Secret appointments were being cancelled at the last minute. Partners were asking why schedules had changed. He tried to restore order on the surface with hastily written emails and hasty meetings, insisting that everything was still in order. But inside, he was as chaotic as a sudden audit. Knowing that Amanda could pull back the curtain at any moment and Lily had gone further than he had thought, he told a few people that Lily's personal problems were affecting his work and that he needed to keep a professional distance. A vague enough phrase to shield himself from difficult questions. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. What he couldn't control, though, was Lily's new calm, the calm of someone who had already chosen her path, and it was that calm that made his position more precarious than any market upheaval. As the retest date approached, Amanda received a crucial piece of the puzzle. A scan of the cold storage logs showed a brief power outage the night Damien's sample was moved. At the same time, the hallway camera failed for 7 minutes. Beneath it was the signature of a former forensics assistant who had moved to a private company with loose connections to the partners Cain was negotiating with. There was nothing incriminating on the paper, but just enough to build a plausible theory that someone had deliberately turned the genetic comparisons into a maze. Amanda closed the file, arranged the pages in order so that she could present them as a coherent narrative when needed, and told Lily that the results, no matter what, could not be stolen again. The night before the appointment, Lily didn't sleep. She walked through each room, stopping at the corner of the table where this story had begun, looking at the unknown envelope like a lost version of herself, then turning away from it to move on. She remembered Cain's suggestion to retreat, his tone as he used Chancellor as a shield, his surprise at her resolve, and Colin's long shadow over the choices he'd made. She reminded herself that motherhood wasn't about choosing a man to support. It was about creating an orderly home so that a new being entering the world wouldn't have to learn to read the game before learning to speak. The fear was still there, but it had changed color from the black of panic to the cool gray of discipline. And Cain, sitting in his office as the city quieted, thought seriously for the first time about abandoning not only his plan to reunite, but his habit of using ambiguity as a weapon. He knew that if the outcome called him father, he would have to pay for his recent turns with unconditional honesty. If the outcome called Damien, he would have to stop casting shadows on the dead to save what remained of his humanity in his children's eyes. There was no branch that would allow him to stay where he was. And for a rare moment, he thought that might be a good thing if he could just grab it. The next morning, the door to the lab opened like every other door in the city, cold and impersonal. But the person who walked in was different. Lily was no longer the one holding the unknown envelope and shivering. Amanda was no longer the one probing and suspicious. And even Cain, though he was absent, was no longer the name that automatically evoked defensiveness. The answer would come when it came. What mattered was the framework they had built around it. A transparent process, clear boundaries, and a plan to protect the two children from the storm of adults. No matter whose name was written, Lily had reclaimed the right to define her own story. And that was the foundation on which everything else, love, responsibility, redemption, had a chance to stand. And when the last sheet of paper is pulled from the printer, the game is no longer about exploiting ambiguity. If it's Damien, Amanda will pursue the cracks in the chain of custody, forcing the invisible hands to reveal themselves. If it's Cain, the plea bargain and the roadmap for redemption are in place. And Lily, in both cases, will teach Maddie and Charlie a hard but necessary lesson. The truth may hurt, but it's what keeps people from falling into less than savory versions of the people they love. In Genoa City, where everything is subject to manipulation, she has chosen the one thing that no one will touch, her standards for her family. And that choice.com, methodical, uncompromising, is the worst thing for any plan that lives in the shadows. Lily found herself standing in an echoless void, where every conversation stopped at the same blind spot. Stalemate, not the kind of stalemate where people had a heated argument and then slammed their doors, but the kind of damp silence that seeped into the details of her life, making her tired even when she tried to smile. In the days before, she had tried every logical approach, slowly asking questions, reiterating timelines, suggesting that trust couldn't be restored by promises without evidence. But Cain always stopped short of the most important line, transparency. By now, Lily's sense of loss was no longer a wave, but a frozen lake, where her eyes scanned for any cracks that might lead to a warmer truth. She also knew that if she continued to stand on this ice and pretend it was solid ground, one day it would break without warning. Cain appeared on a slanting afternoon, keeping a safe distance, as if he were afraid that breathing too hard would break the bond. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. He spoke more than he had on other days, his voice earnest, but laced with the thoughtful pauses of a man accustomed to bargaining. He told her how much he wanted Lily back, that every plan he had ever crafted for her would be thrown away right now, if that was the price they would pay to be together again. He said he truly believed they belonged together. That if he stopped believing in that, in them in a family built not on words, but on actions, then he would be the one to walk away before he could hurt her anymore. The confession wasn't a perfect performance. It stumbled. There were moments when Cain's eyes slipped away. But it had the roughness of someone trying to be honest within his own limits. And it made Lily just for a moment want to believe that there was still a way between them. The moment was interrupted by a slight vibration in Lily's pocket. Devon's message came like a clean blade cutting through the line that had been forming between them. The article exposing Cain as Dumas had been released. It wasn't a bar corner rumor or an anonymous group post. It was a thorough documented eyewitness investigation pushed to the front pages of platforms the entire city was watching. Lily felt the ice beneath her feet finally crack. She knew instantly that the worst thing was not just that the public would know an alias, but that the twins would find out that their father had been lying for 6 years. Through a medium other than the adult they had come to rely on. Everything in Lily moved in a different way. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't throw the phone. Instead, she took a deep breath as if she were entering an operating room. Her left hand on the table to steady her pace, her voice calmer than she had imagined. She showed Cain the screen, saw a flicker in his eyes that was too brief to be regret, more like a miscalculation. He stammered a few words about fabrications, about sabotaging opponents, about unreliable sources. But Lily had read enough, seen enough, and understood enough that the Dumas story was no longer a shadow to be stepped on and brushed off. It was a brightly lit building, windows wide open, ready for anyone to walk in and inspect. Cain pulled out his phone immediately, calling his contacts, updating his legal team, asking the Chancellor's PR team to prepare a statement, combing through every post with sensitive keywords, and removing anything that might be misleading. He told Lily quickly that he needed her help, damage control, because she was the only one who could stop the story before it burned everything to the ground. He laid out the steps in a professional tone, an explanation to Maddie and Charlie, before they saw it online, a brief meeting with Devin to get the context, a press release denying the key points, and promising to cooperate with the authorities. It all fell neatly into Cain's domain, handling crises like a public relations exercise. But Lily no longer wanted to be a variable in his calculations. She reminded Cain that he had said he was willing to abandon his entire plan for her. And, if that was true, she needed him to abandon whatever he had in store for the Newmans, the Abbotts, and even her. She spoke clearly and slowly, like reading a clause from a contract they'd both signed in indelible ink. Stop all attacks. Stop all backstabbing. Back out of shady deals. Publicly apologized to everyone hurt by the manipulations. Not because she wanted to humiliate him, but because she wanted to place a visible moral beacon in the midst of the fog that Dumas had created. Cain was momentarily unnerved by the request that didn't smell like a conference room. He asked if it was really necessary when the story was full of holes. When there was still a chance to hit the legitimacy of the source, when there was a way to twist the story. Lily looked at him for so long that he had to look away. She said only one thing. If he believed in us, then don't let us become a cover for a war he had chosen long ago. She would stand by him when he told the truth, not when he tried to add another coat of paint to a damp wall. The words poured water on an invisible fire inside Cain, not extinguishing it, but exposing the charred woodwork inside. In parallel, Devin followed a different path. He sent Lily additional attachments, pages of documents showing how Dumas operated, vague trust contracts, anonymous call records, and even a brief timeline that showed some undeniably coincidental dates. There was no mention of Cain by name, but the chains were thick enough for serious readers to ask. Devin didn't tell Lily what to do. He just said that this media storm wouldn't wait for anyone. Lily thanked him, put the phone away, and called Maddie and Charlie. She told them to come home early, saying nothing on the phone other than that she needed a family conversation tonight. Her words didn't shake, but her heart was pounding like a clock in a house that had just turned off all the lights. Love in its most difficult to express, but also its most enduring form. Love sets boundaries in the right place, at the right time, and doesn't lose yourself for fear of losing each other. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the latest news on our channel. The video transcript reveals a deeply complex and emotional storyline centered around Lily from The Young and the Restless. Lily faces the intense uncertainty and turmoil surrounding her pregnancy, particularly the question of the child's paternity, which remains shrouded in ambiguity due to manipulated DNA test results. The story unfolds in the high-stakes environment of Genoa City, where secrets lies, and power plays threaten to upend the lives of everyone involved, especially Lily and her children. Damien's death casts a long shadow, with evidence suggesting his DNA sample was tampered with, leading to inconclusive paternity results. Amanda, Lily's lawyer, uncovers a conspiracy involving tampered lab samples and corporate intrigue, while Cain, a key figure in the story and potential father, reacts defensively and evasively, aiming to protect his control and reputation. Lily, resolved to protect her children and herself, commits to uncovering the truth no matter the cost, preparing legal safeguards and insisting on transparency. Cain's duplicity and the influence of a manipulative character named Colin complicate matters further, creating a fog of deception. As public exposure of Cain's secret identity as Dumas emerges, the stakes escalate. Lily demands Cain's honesty and a cessation of his shadowy dealings to protect their family's moral foundation. The story closes with Lily accepting the painful but necessary path of truth and transparency, determined to shield her children from deceit and manipulation, even as the city's rumors and power plays continue. DNA test results tampered with, creating uncertainty about the child's paternity. Amanda, Lily's lawyer, uncovers a conspiracy involving switched genetic samples. Lily embraces a calm, resolute approach to protect her children and seek the truth. Cain reacts with distrust and evasiveness, trying to maintain control over the narrative. Colin's manipulative influence haunts Cain's decisions and adds complexity to the crisis. Public exposure of Cain's secret identity as Dumas threatens to destroy his reputation. Lily insists on truth, accountability, and setting boundaries despite personal pain. The fragility of truth in a world of manipulation. The tampering of DNA tests symbolizes how even the most objective evidence can be corrupted by human interference. This highlights the theme of trust and betrayal central to the narrative, emphasizing the difficulty of discerning truth in a morally ambiguous environment. Lily's struggle is not just about paternity but about reclaiming certainty and control. In a chaotic world, legal and procedural safeguards as tools of empowerment. Amanda's meticulous investigation into the chain of custody and her strategic advice to use an independent lab with double security measures underscore the importance of institutional checks and balances. This also reflects how the legal system can be weaponized or used for justice, depending on who wields it and how carefully it is navigated. Lily's choice to build a legal safety net shows her transition from victim to proactive protector. Emotional resilience through calm discipline. Lily's evolution from panic to a cool gray of discipline illustrates the power of emotional regulation amid crisis. Her conscious decision to face the truth, prepare for confrontation, and protect her children's moral compass demonstrates maturity and strength. Contrasting sharply with Cain's evasiveness and fear of losing control, this dynamic deepens the character development and adds psychological realism to the storyline. The complexity of family dynamics in crisis. The involvement of children. Maddie and Charlie highlights the collateral damage of adult conflicts. Lily's commitment to reveal the unvarnished truth to her children, despite the risks, reflects an ethical stance prioritizing long-term integrity over short-term comfort. It also raises questions about the impact of parental secrets and lies on children's identity and trust. The shadow of manipulation and power. Colin's influence on Cain and the repeated pattern of creating fog around the truth symbolize how power structures perpetuate deception. This adds a broader social commentary on how corruption and manipulation can infiltrate personal relationships and institutions, making individual agency more challenging. Cain's defensive tactics and strategic stalling reveal how fear of losing control can lead to further ethical compromise. Public exposure as a catalyst for change. The release of the investigative article exposing Cain's alias Dumas acts as a narrative turning point. It forces characters into accountability and transparency, highlighting the role of media and public scrutiny in uncovering hidden truths. Lily's insistence on a moral reckoning following this exposure shows her growth and her refusal to be complicit in further deception. Love's boundaries and the cost of honesty. The story explores the tension between love and truth, showcasing how love sometimes requires setting firm boundaries and choosing painful honesty over comforting lies. Lily's ultimatum to Cain to stop backstabbing, apologize, and engage sincerely reflects the complex nature of love as both a source of strength and vulnerability. It emphasizes that authentic relationships demand accountability and cannot thrive in shadows. This narrative weaves together themes of trust, deception, legal intrigue, emotional resilience, and moral responsibility, set against the backdrop of a city where power and secrets dominate. Lily's journey is one of reclaiming agency, protecting her family, and demanding truth in a world intent on obfuscation.